What's up guys, Ruppy here, welcoming you to my draft analysis for the BBR Summer Scramble 2023. Feels a little weird being back in the BBR considering, as I'm sure many of you remember, I was in Season 2 of the league, made semifinals, and then have not been back since, but that's neither here nor there at this point. It may not be the BBR proper, but I'm back! Anyway, the BBR Summer Scramble is a tournament that the league is hosting for pretty much anyone who wants to join. We all were put into pools for our drafts, and then the pools were reshuffled into battle pools. From there, the top 2 coaches from each pool will go into a seeded bracket, where it, I believe, becomes a single elimination tournament, and the top 4 participants will earn a cash prize out of this, so there's a bit of incentive to help people play better, I guess. Don't know how well it's going to work out for me or not. Believe me, I could definitely use the money, but honestly, just being able to play again and get back into this is more than enough for me. This is also a Wi-Fi league, so hooray for the return of Wi-Fi content. So in regards to the draft, this is how it worked. Each pool basically had their own draft board, so when we get to the battle pools, there probably will be some potential mirror matches between Mons, especially some of the upper tier picks. We were given 90 points to draft 8 Pokemon exactly. There are no transactions as well, so whatever team you pick, you're stuck with it. So you had to make sure you really use your points wisely, making sure you absolutely have to get draft 8 Mons, and make the most of those points and the number of Mons you would be having. One other thing to note, which I will address more in detail when we get to my specific pick for it. The Terra rules for the BBR Summer Scramble. Each team is allowed 1 Terra Captain, only 1. That Mon does have free Terra, so it can terrestrialize into any type. There are no restrictions on that. The one catch is that we are doing this in a sort of open team sheet-esque format. That means if you are bringing your Terra Captain, before you battle your opponent, you do have to tell them what Terra type your Terra Captain is using. It doesn't allow them to be able to prep for it, but it does allow them to keep that in the back of their mind with whatever they'd already brought to the game. So I think it's a pretty neat way to handle the terrestrialization mechanic, since I know a lot of leagues have been handling it in very different ways, and the mechanic as a whole has been just as, if not more, divisive than Dynamaxing from last gen. Anyway, let's go ahead and get into my draft itself, shall we? So, I was put into the Happiny draft pool, and I happened to get the number 1 pick, which I don't know if that's simply luck of the draw, depending on who you ask, or if maybe D-Ray was doing me a favor and making up for the fact he kicked me out of Season 2 playoffs, but regardless, the benefit to the first pick is that I obviously set the tone for the draft. I'm allowed to basically pick anything on the board, no questions asked. There is nothing that is off limits to me because it already got picked. So I had everything at my disposal. The downside is what I would refer to as me being in the front wheel pick, because obviously I make my pick, then I have to wait an obscenely long time before it gets back to me, but then I get to make 2 picks back to back. Usually don't find myself in the wheel pick position, especially that high on the list, so it was going to be interesting to see how that played out. I'm used to being near the wheel, not being the wheel. Regardless, given everything I've laid out, I felt that for my first pick, I should pick something that I thought would benefit me because of familiarity. Something I could try my best to build a team around because I've used it a fair amount, I know how it works. And I thought the Mon that best suited that idea was Iron Valiant. Iron Valiant is one of 2 Mons on my team that was explicitly Terra banned, in its case because of its high point value. So that's something to keep in mind as far as my option, as far as looking over my team and trying to figure out why I chose the Terra Captain I did when we get to it, which will be shortly. But Iron Valiant as a whole is a really solid mon, and I have fallen in love with this thing. It has fantastic stats. Obviously, it's a bit of a glass cannon, but if you play it well, it certainly works. Fairy Fighting is a very unique type, to say the least. Obviously, it has Quark Drive, so I could use Booster Energy as an item on it to get a stat boost. Or if I have something that could potentially set Electric Terrain, I could use that as well. Iron Valiant can go physical, it can go special, it is quite fast. So, overall, I think Iron Valiant actually sets the tone pretty nicely for this draft and for my team. Especially since one thing I've learned from using it in drafts in another league, Iron Valiant's move pool is obscenely deep. I don't know for sure if it gained anything new or useful from the DLC, since this is a DLC, a post-DLC tournament. But the fact that its move pool is so deep and has so many options to cover so many things already makes Iron Valiant a very versatile threat that's hard to prep for. So, with that out of the way, obviously the next step is to start trying to build around Valiant. So I immediately started looking to Steel types, because obviously Iron Valiant being a fairy that is weak to itself because of that fighting type is obviously no good for anybody. And there were quite a few weaknesses that I did need to account for with Iron as well. And I found a mon that actually works quite well in covering the vast majority of those weaknesses. All of them, in fact. That mon being Heatran. Fire Steel, the Flash Fire ability to deter any potential fire types or fire moves being thrown my way. Flame Body to burn physical attackers. Heatran certainly has a lot going for it, especially since it has a very good stat distribution across the board, especially in terms of its bulk. Base 106 defenses and base 91 HP is nothing to sneeze at. Also, its mere existence pretty much covers just about every single one of Iron Valiant's weaknesses, so already these two are making a really good combination for each other. There's also the fact that Heatran gives me a Stealth Rock setter, and that already sets Heatran up for success with this team. You are probably looking over my little team board off to the side there, and seeing the little crystal background behind Heatran's portrait. That is because after the draft, I opted to declare Heatran as my Terra Captain. Honestly, I thought Heatran was the best mon I could have gone for, especially since I could terrestrialize it into a number of types to get around its own weaknesses, like, say, water, or fighting, or especially that times 4 ground weakness that this thing has to carry, so I don't have to consider running something like Air Balloon or Shuckaberry. I feel like that opens the door for Heatran a little more in terms of what it can do, especially since everything gets Terra Blast, so yeah, it's always a nifty little option. But with my Fairy and my Steel type secured, I figured a Dragon was next. Yes, going with the classic Fairy Dragon Steel Core. And I found a mon that I felt also fit really well with Heatran, and to some degree, Iron Valiant as well. Maybe not as much, but I feel like its offensive presence alone certainly helps matters. And my third pick, right after Heatran, ended up being Dragonite, the second of the 2 mons on my team that was Terra banned. If anyone has dealt with Terra Normal Extreme Speed Dragonite, I don't think it's hard to see why this mon was Terra banned, so I couldn't have considered it over Heatran even if I wanted to. Regardless of the Terra shenanigans though, Dragonite is still a very solid mon that I have had a lot of success with in draft in one form or another. Its multi-scale ability basically means it takes less damage while it's still at full health, which I can definitely works in my favor. Dragon Flying is a fairly interesting type. Its times 4 ice weakness is mitigated by Heatran. It also gives me another fighting resist to help out Heatran alongside Iron Valiant. Yes, I am kind of stacking up on fairy weaknesses, but It's fine. I've got Heatran. It will be fine. Still, Dragonite's bulk is actually fairly solid regardless. Base 134 attack is nothing to sneeze at. It's got usable special attack too, so I could use a special attacking Dragonite if I wanted to. Dragonite does have some versatility to it, and I'm looking forward to being able to see how well I can make that work in tandem with Iron Valiant, especially with Heatran kind of backing them up. So with my Fairy Dragon Steel Core completed, I wanted to switch gears and focus on the other common core, Fire, Water, Grass. Maybe not the wisest idea in an 8-mon format with this level of restrictions, but I felt I could make it work with my team. As I'm looking through water and grass types, something else is sticking out in my mind. I have Heatran for rocks, and that's pretty much it. Which does me no good. I need something else, something more. And then I came across a mon that I've been wanting to try for a while and never really had the chance to, and it was still on the board when the draft got back to me at the end of end out round 4. So I figured, you know what? Let's take a stab at it. This might seem familiar to anyone who has seen PokeAim's team for the PPL that he just won the championship with. I, honest to God, admit, I did not intend to basically draft what I believe were 3 of Joey's top picks, but it's how it worked out, and we'll see if I can make it work just as well as he did. In case you're curious, my round 4 pick is Hisuian Samurott. I mean, what can be said about this mon? It's got solid attack, it's got solid offensive stats, decent physical defense, good HP. 85 speed kind of helps bridge the gap a bit more between Iron Valiant and my other 2 picks. It has the sharpness ability to boost all its cutting moves, which definitely helps out for the likes of Razor Shell. And the one reason that stands above all else as to why people get this mon, and that is Ceaseless Edge. A move that can do damage, set spikes, and said spikes cannot be reflected courtesy of something like Magic Bounce because it comes from an attacking move. What's not to love about it? Not to mention Hisuian Samurott gets priority in the form of Aqua Jet, which certainly helps out when you consider that Dragonite has extreme speed as well. And I believe Iron Valiant has, I want to say, Vacuum Wave? So I've got a bit of priority to work with if the situation absolutely calls for it. So between Rocks from Heatran, Spikes from Samurott, assuming I can hit Ceaseless Edge, I think I've got something good going here. Obviously going into round 5, I'm kicking off the round again. So I figured I'd finish off my Fire, Water, Grass core, and I found something that I thought synergized fairly well with what I had so far in that regard. Especially considering I have no pivoting right now. And I feel a good way to get around that is by going with an electric type, because I could probably use one of those on my team too. Which is how I ended up drafting Rotom Mow. All the Rotom forms are notorious for their good bulk, their fairly good special attack, and Rotom Mow obviously is locked into having Leaf Storm as a grass move, which is extremely powerful. Yes, it does lower special attack, but I can just Volt Switch out and get around that. Especially since most of the things that would come into Block Volt Switch, that being ground types, really don't want to be eating a Leaf Storm. Not to mention all the other little tricks that Rotom has in its little lawnmower driver's seat, I guess. I mean, it gets screens, it can paralyze things, it's got Will-O-Wisp. Rotom Mow has quite a lot going for it, and again, I feel like the tools it has kind of helps benefit the team I have at this point in time. Especially since like with Dragonite and Hisuian Samurott, it gives me answers to Heatran's water weakness. It covers Hisuian Samurott's electric weakness very well, which is a new issue I had to address at this point in my draft. Adds on to the grass resist to cover Samurott as well. I think Rotom actually does provide a lot for my team, and will help me get some momentum going to get in some of my more dangerous mons. Now at this point in the draft, I'm looking over my team. I've got my 2 main cores with 3 picks left to go. Starting to run a little low on points. So, at this point, two things immediately become apparent to me. I mean, I've got rocks, I've got spikes. I don't have anything that can remove hazards, though. And on top of that, I figured something that was more dedicated, physically bulky would certainly help kind of shore things up a bit, because I've got quite a bit going in the special defense end of things at this point in time. Physical defense could definitely stand to be boosted a little more, though. And I found a mon that I have found great success with in another league, and kind of provides me with all of that and a little more. That being Donphan. Donphan's sturdy ability certainly helps make sure I can send it in, guarantee live a hit, be able to get rocks up or spin them away. Its ground typing certainly helps further curtail any electric attacks that are being thrown my way. It also gives me a poison resist, which outside of Heatran's immunity, is the first time I've kind of addressed that in terms of Iron Valiant and now Rotom-Mow. As I said, it can set rocks, it can spin them away, which is very important considering I don't have much in the way of hazard removal on this team. There's not a lot more that really needs to be said about Donphan. It's a solid physical mon. It's got very good physical bulk, and it fills a couple holes in my team that I was sorely lacking in. Now at this point, I've only got 7 points left. I definitely went quite a bit top heavy on my draft. So my last two picks I would have to use very wisely, because especially considering that I was not going to have any transactions to swap them out. Not that I have normally been one to use transactions anyway, that's just how I've always operated. But regardless, I didn't have that potential safety net to consider. So as I'm looking over my team, the one thing that stands out to me, above all else at this point, is my fairy weakness. Yes, I do have Heatran, who quad resists it, but I can't rely solely on Heatran to be able to tank all my fairy hits. Especially since I would not be surprised if I end up matched up against any rosters that not only have a fairy type of their own, but also have a lot of mons that can pack fairy moves, specifically to take advantage of this weakness. And at this point I also figured I got a couple more holes I could fill in terms of my defenses, so I found a mon that I think actually works quite well for what I want to use for the needs I have for this point in time. That being Muck. Not a Alolan Muck, regular Muck. To be honest, I actually could have drafted a Alolan Muck too. I believe it was actually in a spot on the board where I could pick it with the 7 points I had left and still had room for one more mon. But I specifically wanted that Fairy Resist, which is something that Muck has that Alolan Muck does not. I know a lot of people see Alolan Muck as the superior option. I don't disagree with that. But for the team I have at this point in time, Muck felt like the better fit. I mean, it has Sticky Hold to be able to hang on to its item in case anyone wants to throw around knockoffs, which could be potentially detrimental to other mons on my team. Poison Touch is certainly helpful, and I know Alolan Muck certainly gets a lot of use out of it, so why not regular Muck? Also, regular Muck gives me Toxic Spikes now, so I have that as a potential option. I am rocking almost all the hazards. Only thing I'm missing is webs, and ah well. Muck's got great special bulk and a good attack stat too, so I feel Muck actually works quite well here. 3 points are all I had left, and I had one more mon left I needed to pick. So I shuffled through a couple of different options here, including debating the idea of grabbing a low-tier bug type specifically for sticky webs, which maybe I should have gone with that, maybe I shouldn't have, but it is what it is. Ultimately, I decided that maybe going in a somewhat more bulky route was the better option to help fully shore up my defenses and help out with making sure this team can take hits and cover the glass cannons I have in my upper tier picks. So to that end, I went with what I believe is the only mon I actually drafted that came back with the DLC. I love the fact I'm playing in a DLC draft and barely have anything that actually comes from the DLC. But I addressed that problem with my last pick, Dusclops. Dusclops is stupidly bulky. There's no denying that. I know a lot of people favor Dust Noir. Personally, I do too, but Dust Noir was 1 out of my point range and 2 already drafted at this point anyway, I believe. Which was perfectly fine. But I mean, pressure to help do some potential PP stalling if I absolutely need to go that route. Frisk to reveal items so I can start planning accordingly while in the middle of the game for that. Its ghost typing certainly adds a few things that I did not have before, like immunity to normal types and fighting types, which anything to further help Heatran and Heatran Samurott on that front. Also, one of the things that returned with the DLC along with Dusclops was Poltergeist. And I think Dusclops certainly appreciates having that move back. So, there is my draft. I apologize if this was not the most exciting thing. I am still admittedly quite rusty when it comes to doing these videos. Hopefully that will return to me in time. But that is my team. How well it works, I guess we will find out soon enough as the tournament gets underway. But I do thank you guys so very much for watching. I have been Ruppy, and my Columbus Swoo and I will see you next time. Take care.